Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. The Christmas air bit at the edges of the world, sharp and unrelenting, but James carried a warmth inside him that refused to fade. He sat by the window of his modest home, fingers tracing the edges of a photograph from yesterday. In it, he and Diepp wandered through the small town, its streets strung with lights that flickered like stars brought low. Her smile, so clear, so unguarded, gleamed like dew on a winter morning, and it pulled a soft, secretive grin from him. There was something in her eyes, a quiet light that danced just beyond his reach, stirring his heart with a rhythm he couldn't name or claim. Outside, the wind wailed, rattling the bare branches and sweeping leaves across the frozen ground. It seemed to whisper a truth he'd long known. Winter wasn't just a chill in the air. It was the ache of empty spaces in a soul left wanting. Inside, the room felt still, almost too quiet, save for the faint creak of the floorboards as the manager from the lumber workshop stepped in. She carried a heavy ledger, its pages worn from use, and her voice droned on, steady and mechanical, as she listed the days with imports. James nodded, his responses automatic, his eyes still tethered to the photo in his hands. The numbers blurred into the background, meaningless against the vivid memory of Diepp's laughter echoing through the festive streets. The manager finished her report and left, her footsteps fading into the hum of the wind. James set the photo down, his fingers lingering on its edge, then stood and reached for his coat. A restless pull tugged at him, urging him toward the hill where Diepp was working. He told himself it was duty, just a quick check on the progress of the ginger planting, but the lie dissolved in the depths of his chest. He didn't want the hill. He wanted her, if only to catch another glimpse of that smile. The hill rose gently against the gray sky, its slopes dotted with figures bent over the earth. Diepp was among them, her small frame steady as she worked, her hands swift and sure as they pressed ginger roots into the soil. Sweat glistened on her brow, catching the faint light of the winter sun, but her eyes sparkled with a joy so pure it seemed to belong to another season. She loved this labor, the way it tethered her to the land, the way the wind wove through the pine trees like a song, the way the damp, earthy scent filled her lungs. It was a quiet communion, a moment where she could forget the weight of the world and simply be. She didn't know it, not yet, but a part of her waited for a shadow to fall across her work, for a voice to call her back to something beyond the dirt and roots. When James appeared, his boots crunching softly on the frost-kissed ground, she felt it before she saw him. A shift in the air, a ripple through her steady rhythm. She looked up, and there he was, his figure solid against the shifting wind. He smiled, a gentle curve of his lips that carried the warmth of sunlight piercing through the canopy, and asked about the planting. His words were casual, practical, but his eyes betrayed him, lingering on her a beat too long. Diepp's heart jolted, a quick, fleeting thing she couldn't hold on to, and she answered with a nod, her voice soft. They both knew this wasn't about ginger or progress. It was a thread stretching between them, fragile and unspoken, pulling them closer than words could manage. Miles away, in a house tucked against the edge of a field, Tung sat with his mother's voice buzzing in his ears. "Get married, Tung," she said, her tone a mix of exasperation and hope. He offered a weak smile, a deflection, but his thoughts drifted elsewhere, to Diepp. She was there, vivid and unbidden, her laughter ringing in his mind like a bell he couldn't silence. He saw her on the hill, her small hands buried in the earth, her face alight with that effortless joy. She'd slipped into his heart long ago, a quiet presence he couldn't shake. Did she ever think of him, he wondered? Or was he just a shadow on the edges of her world, watching as she glowed in someone else's light? Each thought of her pricked him, a tender ache that bloomed and faded, leaving him with questions he didn't dare voice. The wind carried on, threading through the pines, tying their silent longings into a single invisible tapestry. James stood on the hill, Diepp's nearness a balm against the cold, while Tung lingered in his distant corner, nursing a hope too delicate to hold. The day unfolded, simple and unremarkable, yet beneath its surface, their hearts beat with a quiet insistence, searching, yearning, and waiting for what might come next. Below is an 800-word version of Segment 2 written in American English, crafted in the psychological life genre with a lyrical, introspective tone, rich emotional depth, and a humanistic perspective. Segment 2. The sun dipped low as James and Diepp left the hill, the afternoon light softening into a golden haze. They walked side by side, the crunch of frost beneath their feet blending with the distant murmur of the wind through the pines. The town lay ahead, its modest streets calling them toward a quieter refuge. They found themselves in a small bookstore, its shelves heavy with the scent of aged paper and ink. Diep ran her fingers along the spines, her eyes lighting up with a childlike wonder that James couldn't help but watch. He loved how she lingered over each book, as if they held secrets she alone could hear. They picked out a few volumes, simple stories, nothing grand, and carried them like treasures to a nearby tea shop. Inside, the air was warm, laced with the sweet aroma of milk tea. They settled by a window, cups steaming between them, and let the hours unravel in soft conversation. Diep spoke of her childhood, barefoot summers and the songs her mother hummed, while James shared fragments of dreams he'd tucked away, too fragile to chase. Her laughter rang out, clear and bright like wind chimes, cutting through the hum of the shop. It wrapped around him, pulling him into a moment so perfect he forgot the ticking of time. He watched her, the way her hands cradled the cup, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, and thought, if this could stretch forever, I'd ask for nothing more. The world outside faded, leaving just the two of them, suspended in a bubble of warmth amid the winter's chill. As dusk settled, James walked Diep home. Her house sat nestled in a field, small and unassuming, its simplicity a mirror to her own quiet grace. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room as they stepped inside. James pulled one of the books from their haul and began to read aloud, his voice low and steady, threading through the stillness like a river over smooth stones. Diep sat close, her head resting against his leg, her eyes drifting shut as the story wove its spell. The words painted pictures of far-off lands, of hearts laid bare, and she slipped into them, her breath slowing, her body sinking into a peace she hadn't known she craved. In her half-dreams, she stood again on the Ginger Hill, hand in hand with someone whose face she couldn't quite see, the world soft and endless around her. James finished the tale, his voice trailing into silence, and glanced down. Diep slept, her chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm, her cheeks flushed from the fire's glow. She looked so small, so unguarded, and something tender swelled in him, a longing to shield her from the cold, from the weight of days to come. He hesitated, then whispered, "Diep, wake up. I've got to go." His voice was soft, careful not to shatter the fragile stillness. She stirred, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes, a shy smile tugging at her lips. James stood, the warmth of her touch lingering on his skin as he moved toward the door. He paused, glancing back. She sat by the fire, the book in her hands, her gaze distant and wistful. He wondered if she felt it too, the ache of a moment slipping away, too fleeting to hold. The night deepened as he left, the cold biting at his face, but Diep remained by the hearth. She opened the book, her fingers tracing the lines James had read, his voice still echoing in her mind. The fire snapped and danced, its light playing across her face, illuminating the quiet turmoil within. She thought of him, of the way he'd looked at her in the tea shop, the way his presence filled the empty corners of her day. There were gaps between them, silences that spoke louder than their words, and they left her restless. What did it mean, this warmth he brought into her winter? She didn't know, couldn't know, not yet. But as the flames flickered, she felt a spark of something, hope perhaps, or the promise of more, buried in the ordinary rhythm of her life. Outside, the stars pierced the dark, cold and distant, but the fire burned on. It mirrored her heart, steady and persistent, aglow against the night. Diep read on, the story unfolding anew under her touch, and in its pages she found echoes of herself, of longing, of connection, of the fragile beauty in fleeting things. The world turned, the wind howled, but here by the hearth, she held onto a moment, a memory, a thread of something yet to be named.